Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Spirited Dialogue hosted by Transformity. I am Asanka.
I'm Gautham Palapa.
We are the co-founders of Transformity. Our mission is to transform organizations through technology and empathy. So last episode we spoke about value. And we looked at how value goes beyond the financial benefits each and every organization is gaining, and then how they can look at all the stakeholders, as well as how organizations can focus and generate value based on their strategy by taking input from the all these three stakeholders: the employees, the partners, and shareholders. As well as we looked at what type of basic strategies that they can use in this particular mission. Then we touched based on the practical issues organizations are facing, as well as some kind of high-level measurements as well, what they can look at whether they are making some progress. But we didn't get into detail of how you measure, and I think any strategy, most important thing is to identify whether we are on the correct path and whether we are making a progress. So as a transformation leader, it's very important to focus on these measurements. So today we thought of focus on that. So Gautham, why don't you start with how can a leader quantify the definition of success for the organization with the business outcomes?
Yeah, thanks Asanka for that recap. Welcome everyone. So I want to start off with this particular saying that we constantly hear in a digital transformation, that a digital transformation is a journey, not a destination. So I actually want to challenge that and give an analogy to explain the outcome of clearly defining and quantifying the definition of success for a business outcome. So imagine, if you will, a ship that was setting out to sea in the 15th century. Right. Its goal was to reach some distant land and maybe discover a new continent, maybe discover a new island, and so on. So if during that situation, if the captain would have merely stated, we aim to find new lands without specifics, imagine what would have happened. That ship might have ended up anywhere. Or worse, it might have drifted aimlessly in the vast ocean. Anyone who's watched Pirates of the Caribbean might recognize that as the Captain Jack Sparrow method of sailing. But in real life, we actually need to have a few more parameters. So the first one that's really important is a destination. This is also what I call as the quantifiable definition of success. So the captain must have a clear definition in mind and say something like, we aim to reach the shores of Bermuda, for example. That destination is analogous to a quantified definition of success in a business transformation or for the business outcome. It's specific, it can be measured, and it provides clear direction. The next parameter is we want to have the navigation and mapping, which aligns to strategic planning. So knowing the destination, the captain would use maps and navigational tools to plot a course. And so similarly, businesses will use strategies and plans to reach their quantifiable outcomes. And we also try to estimate or project how long it would take to reach that destination or the aspirational state. And after that, we'll have milestones, which is progress tracking. So along the journey, there definitely would have been waypoints to ensure that the ship is on the right course, like passing certain islands that is already known, or maybe some reefs or sandbars. And in business, these milestones help track the progress towards the final destination. And it's not just about the milestones, but we want to have adjustments as well. So where we are pivoting or re-strategizing as needed. So if a ship is off course or it runs into a storm or some unforeseen challenges, the captain makes those adjustments. And so the businesses might also need to pivot, re-strategize, or persevere based upon the market changes or internal challenges. So after all these things are done, there is one thing that is really important, and this is much more closer to you and me, Asanka, which is the crew's motivation, which aligns to the team alignment, right? So if we put ourselves in the crew's shoes, and let's imagine that all they heard from the captain is that their goal is to find new lands. There would be no end in sight. There would be no way to track if they're going in the right direction, and even if there is a hope for success. I feel that there would be a high probability of mutiny if the crew feels motivated, or fear, especially if their supplies would run out or before they meet their goals. But unfortunately, this is how a lot of teams feel when they're assigned to digital transformation initiatives which don't have a clear end in sight. On the other hand, if the crew or the team has a quantifiable definition of success, they will work efficiently when they know that the destination is quantified and they can trust the captain's navigation. They know the end in sight, and even if there are some setbacks, they acknowledge those impediments and work to overcome them. And in businesses, the teams are going to be more motivated and aligned when they understand what the definition of success is and believe that they can accomplish. And then finally, after all these things are done, you want to achieve and arrive safely. So in business speak, that's more of achieving your business outcome. So when the ship finally docks at Bermuda, it's evident that the journey was successful. And similarly, a quantifiable, clear definition of success will allow businesses to unmistakably recognize and celebrate their achievements. And so, if we go back to that analogy, without a clear and quantified destination, the ship might waste resources, time, or even face dangers at sea. And in many situations, an enterprise that's undergoing a digital transformation is very similar to the ship that was finding lands in the 15th century, right? Most of it is usually uncharted territory for the organization, and the businesses without well-defined and quantifiable definitions of success can waste their own resources, lose direction, miss opportunities, make the journey more challenging, the destination elusive, and have really low team morale. And this is why I feel it is critical for leaders to have that clear and quantifiable definition of success for their business outcomes.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things kind of well resonated with me as well. One thing you mentioned about the agility, like how you can do course corrections throughout the transformation based on various factors, right? So one thing we can take a look at how the competition is reacting, and then one thing can be the economic situation of the country as well as the global economy. So those type of things required to take into action, and there can be a new player coming to the market and might dominating. So all these things required to take into account and then adjust that, because one thing that I have noticed in these transformation programs, the resistance to change as well as do these course corrections on time, because people wait and then they just stick to the original strategy and the plan that they have put together. That is one. And the second thing you highlighted about the purpose, again the purpose required to be properly defined. Now, I'll take one example. Now, if you take SpaceX, the purpose is not going to Mars, right? It's basically how you can have Mars become a living place for people. And then again, once we go there, we kind of start it to the living conditions. But it's not the end game. Then there should be back and forth communication between Earth and the Mars as well, and it has to be quicker, cheaper, affordable. All these things are there in that particular purpose. So as a leader, I think it's very important to set that purpose without having a short end game. I think that's where, like, sometimes people think once they go IPO or once they kind of achieve a certain financial target, it's the end game, and then they take a break or they start relaxing. But there's no kind of a end game in these transformations. We have to keep on changing as well as set that purpose correctly, I think.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I'd like to call it an aspirational state or a target state, because that's what we're truly driving towards. The saying, a digital transformation is a journey, comes out of that. It is the promise, or it is the vision of a newer way of operations. And if you really think about it, what a digital transformation plan or any of the business outcomes are trying to do is they're trying to reduce the risk and mitigate the impediments so that we achieve that target state. So a lot of people tend to forget that. And at least in the organizations where I've seen people forgetting it, it tends to become much more static, and it becomes a checklist of tasks or things that need to be done. At which point we're forgetting the spirit or the reason why we embarked on that digital transformation journey. And instead, we're trying to go through the motions and trying to say, if I perform X, then I can claim that I am digitally transformed. But that's not truly the case. We want to make sure that we have achieved some quantifiable success on our business transformation to meet a target state. And then afterwards, we revisit again and continuously do it with feedback loops so that we continuously improve the organization, future-proof it, and make it move forward.
Yeah, I agree. And then another thing that you mentioned about this teamwork as well as different type of responsibilities each and every team will have, as well as individually. Each and every person will have. So that again, very important to communicate as well as emphasize, okay, this is the part that you are playing, how important you are. So I think there should be some autonomy, definitely. But then again, they should understand how everything works together, and everybody's driving through towards the same goal and objectives. I think this we covered about the people, process, as well as a little bit on the technology side as well, on how we are measuring this success. But then again, like as a transformative leader, they might need more insight on what type of methodology that they should follow. Shall we touch base a little bit on that side as well?
Yeah, sure. And I love the fact that when you start talking about the value and talking about how you can create the value and ensure that you achieve it, things start falling in place really easy. So let's start off with where we began this journey on identifying the value created, right? So let's take a couple of examples. The first one that I'm going to say is, let's look at a couple of customer-centric business outcomes, maybe a people-centric business outcome, or a process-centric business outcome, and then finally a tech-centric business outcome. And when we say people-centric, it could be employee or workforce, because we want to make the differentiation between the fact that it's not just customer-centric or customer-obsessed. We want to make sure that in a digital transformation, we have intrinsic improvement also. So from a workspace or a people perspective. So let's take from a customer-centric perspective, improve patient experience is going to be something like in the healthcare industry, people really want to do. They want to improve patient experience, and that's going to be a business outcome. Another example from a customer-centric perspective would be to provide a contactless experience for travelers in the hospitality industry. So let's focus on those two initially. So those are usually good goals or good business outcomes that organizations want to accomplish, and you can identify that there is value when you improve the patient experience or when you provide a much more contactless experience for travelers, or maybe improve the experience for travelers. Now, the way that we would probably go in to formulate the definition of success is to make it a little bit more quantifiable. So think SMART goals. That is, you want to make sure that your definition of success is specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and it's time bound. And if you start putting those parameters together, then you will start fleshing out the definition of success. So, for example, improving patient experience can be done in many ways. You can say, okay, when the patient comes into the hospital, you want to reduce the patient time. So that's a really good goal. So we can translate that into a quantifiable way by saying that we want to reduce the wait time between patient check-in and physician encounter by a certain percentage, let's say 26%. So now automatically it becomes quantifiable, it becomes tangible, it becomes something that can be measured before and after to see if we're actually moving towards that definition of success. And we also know that we don't want to just reduce the wait time, but we want to reduce it by 26%. And it's not the end-to-end wait time that we're focusing on. It is probably between when the patient checked in and the physician encounter. So there's a lot of things in play when we focus on that. And that will obviously improve patient experience. So I think that makes it a little more tangible and coherent, especially with the improve the patient experience example. The second example that I gave was to provide a contactless experience to travelers. That can mean so many things, right? So if we take the hospitality industry or maybe in a hotel, right? We can we can define the success as, let's say we enable 60% of the rooms in each particular brand of hotels to have online check-in and mobile key functionality. So then we are making it much more attainable, we are making it much more quantifiable, and we know what we have to track towards, because 60% of the rooms for a particular brand is achievable, and the things that we have to do is online check-in and mobile functionality. So the conversation starts changing, and people and teams will actually understand what we are trying to do and why we want to achieve this business outcome, because now it becomes much more realistic and they can articulate the value that is gotten by this particular approach. So that's on the customer-centric side. And I just want to see if you want to add something else, Asanka, before we go to two different examples.
Yeah, I think those are like two great examples, and interestingly, I have been involved with implementing both these examples with a few enterprises in these two domains. So one thing I would like to highlight, the how we measure this stuff. Yes, we need to have the systems in place to capture those things, like use IoT, use the enhanced system of record layers, analytics. All these things need to be properly in place. Otherwise, we can't capture, as example, the wait time of a member. I like to call member than a patient. Like that, you can measure it. And the second example you took about contactless. Then again, we need to take a look at how practical, and then how is the experience that end experience the user is getting. As an example, I have seen these QR code based menus in hotel rooms, but with very poor internet connection. Yes. Okay, so you can't access it, and sometimes the menu, that particular internal website is down. So you can't access the menu at all. So then it's giving a negative customer experience than a positive experience. So that's where I think we need to keep on checking, as well as the people who's implementing, they had to be a user as well, and then check what type of experience the end user is getting. So that's going to be really, really important.
I'd like to add on to it because we travel a lot and we stay in a lot of hotels. And this QR code thing, in some hotels, what I've seen is the expectation when you're a traveler or when you're a brand member of that particular, group of hotels. The expectation is that when you scan the QR code, you have the ability to do in-dining requests. Right? That's the true experience that you're looking at. But in many places, what I've seen, especially with certain brands, is all it does is pull up the PDF of a menu. And that's not the experience that we want. So I don't know if the business outcome was we want to make sure that we have a digital experience for in-room dining. And we didn't go the extra step of saying, we want to make it very clear to the customer that, or the guest, that it is only to see what the menu is and not call in or place the order digitally. But the true experience, benefit would have been to go that extra mile and put that in the definition of success, saying when QR code is the QR code is scanned, and then afterwards someone can actually place the order. So there are so many ways that you can look at it. But again, if we have nebulous definitions of success, we are going to have disjointed experiences like this.
Yep.
So we talked about the customer-centric perspective. I want to switch a little bit to a process-centric approach, because a lot of digital transformations involve improving or maybe radically changing the processes. So especially when we're going in a hyper-dynamic, digitalized world, right? One of the biggest outcomes that people want to have is smaller, more frequent feature releases to production. That's one of the most critical things that we want to do. And then the other thing on a tech-centric perspective is we want to modernize the applications and go into like a hybrid cloud environment. So these are the two things. On the process side, you want to make smaller, much more frequent feature releases to production. And on a tech side, you want to have that hybrid cloud opportunity and make sure that you're modernizing your applications. So if we were to formulate the definition of success for those two, if for the smaller, more frequent releases, we want to actually quantify how often we're going to do. So let's say that you want to improve the release time, or say that the definition of success is that the release time is reduced from, say, 6 months for releasing the features to like 21 days. And so at that point now you are making it really clear and quantifiable, like the team can actually work on how they can achieve those 21 days, providing autonomy for the teams, but at the same time signaling what you want to do and why you want to do it. From a modernizing apps and putting it like in a hybrid cloud environment, we could say something like 40% of identified apps are refactored so that they can be elastically grown or scalable and work in a hybrid cloud environment. So the same code base will now work in 2 different public IaaS, or maybe in one public IaaS and on-prem, or something to that effect. So we can put it out there and make it more tangible. And the more clarity that we bring to the definition of success for a business outcome, the easier it is for the teams to come with the how they're going to achieve it. And that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, I think the two things about the process and the technology, why the particular success criteria are not meeting is basically the technology is not working as a supportive component rather than a blocker for the business success, because business requirements are there, business strategies are there, but still I think most of the organizations are struggling at the technology side. So that is where the concepts like platform and how you can simplify some of these technology complexity, and then how you can bring a good level of abstractions into the development and delivery processes. All these things are matter, and then only I think you can have this fast delivery cycles, and without worrying about the underneath plumbing or underneath technology stuff, how you can be quickly gain this success. And the cloud is really important. Actually, we have to utilize it as much as possible. But then again, the blocker is related to the first factor that I mentioned, the lack of maturity on the technology, on how you can quickly something on a cloud environment, how you can take these workloads into the cloud, as well as sometimes it's not practical to be 100% cloud native and use a cloud platform, right? You might need hybrid approach as well. So where's the flexibility, how you can have a secure connection in between your cloud environment and your on-prem work processes and the data that you're running. So all these things are very important. I think that's where the technical architects have a bigger role to understand the business priorities as well as business goals. And then one thing that we mentioned in bunch of our discussions about the business architecture, again, it's playing a bigger role when it comes to these type of outcomes, as well as defining these parameters for the success.
Yeah, totally. So we need to be very clear about the why. And we need to identify what the value is and socialize it. More often than not, in some organizations, what tends to happen is that you have a couple of offsites where the leaders go and they strategize and they build all these things together. And then afterwards, they disseminate it to their departments or to the BUs, to the teams, and so on. But the critical thing that probably is not being promoted a lot is the value that you get by doing it. First thing is to talk about why you want to do it, which is the entire reason why you are embarking on this digital transformation journey, or you're having these business outcomes. The why of the business outcomes, or the purpose, as you mentioned, Asanka, is really, really important, right? But in addition to that, it's not just the why for the organization, but what will change? What value will each individual get? What value will the team get, the department get? And I think when you have the right business outcome and then the definition of success, you can start painting a picture and have those visual indicators and talk about, at a much more discrete way, how people's lives are going to fundamentally change, how value is going to flow within the organization, and what will it cost, and what is the benefit. You will be able to talk about the aspirational state and where we want to get before we revisit again what are the next step of business outcomes that we want to accomplish. And I think that discussion in some places is lacking, which is causing a lot of consternation, churn, and frankly, loss of energy within organizations. And I think if we start going down this route of talking about the why, then the business outcomes, and then afterwards the definition of success, and in the next part of it, logically, we're going to start talking about how to measure. So if all these things are put in place, it becomes really easy to plan and strategize and achieve your business outcomes.
Yeah, I think it was a great discussion. We covered a lot, and thanks everybody for listening. But before we close today's episode, Gautham, why don't you summarize today's discussion?
Yeah, sure. So we started with an analogy of a ship's journey and related that to a digital transformation, and talked about how we need to quantify and have a specific, defined, and quantified goal to achieve our outcomes. I also alluded to Pirates of the Caribbean and Captain Jack Sparrow, and saying that while that is a strategy, that probably is not a really good strategy. We need to be much more deliberate in our approaches. And so quantifying the definition of success for business outcomes is really important, and it can actually vary depending upon the nature of the organization and its specific goals. They can primarily be categorized or classified as customer-centric, people or workforce-centric, process-centric, and tech-centric. And we should have all four of these as we're going through and defining our business outcomes. We should also be able to articulate the definition of success very similar to SMART goals. That is, they have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And it's not just enough to create these definitions of success. The leaders must clearly articulate why this definition of success was chosen and what it will do to the business outcome when achieved, and then socialize it to the organization and ensure that there's no ambiguity. Visual indicators are really important and essential to promoting this aspired state to the organization, and also we need to revisit them at regular intervals and have the right feedback loops to make adjustments or realignments as needed. How's that?
Yep, great. I think you summarized it nicely. So I hope everyone enjoyed this live conversation, and we would like to get your feedback because you might be facing the same problem, as well as you might be working on a solution for these problems as well. So please contact us through the Contact Us form or through social media, LinkedIn as well as Twitter. And again, thanks again, and we will come up with another interesting topic in the next episode. Until next time, from all of us in Transformity, cheers.
Cheers.